of Kittens and Broken Things, Chapter 57. Kara had an adrenaline fall-off, but she kept pacing through it, though her focus was failing her somewhat after the shape of things had seemingly revealed itself, circling the hospital, trying to figure out, trying to grasp where to go from here. She had said she was going home to Garrus, but that felt wrong now, and she tried to see her way through the near future, so she texted him. Said I was coming home. I think I was lying.
At least you're admitting it now.
Don't want to leave it the way it is. Back into the fray.
You can have a frayless day, you know.
In the future, definitely, that's the plan. You and me, no fray. Right now, I'm mid-fray.
Fray away.
She'd stopped shaking from adrenaline, but her legs were numb and wobbly. Maybe her brain was too, but she felt that everyone deserved better than what they were getting, and she should fix that. This wasn't about Shepard or Fanning, Lal or Kara. It was about utilizing all of them, doing all she could. Thinking of herself as more of a spectrum than a polarized set of choices. She had all the choices. She should diversify. Even she deserved better than what she was getting, what she was giving. She'd done well. Now she needed to do better. It felt like a new page, a new moment, striking while iron was hot, poised and intent. There were transformational moments in a life, and this felt like one, quiet and internal, that after this point the way she saw herself, saw others, had to rise to a new level of comprehension, something she had not reached yet but had intuited. It wasn't about rising smoke or death, not even about a lost limb, but more about the potential cost of a life. She took lives into her hands, and some were put in her hands, and she needed to survive the outcomes, needed to find the real shape of what it would mean if Reapers arrived tomorrow. Each choice, each life, burying her in its seemingly infinite significance. Yesed's life and limb had been, was, infinite, personal. She wasn't backing down from that. She needed to embrace it, own it, not coldly. That's where most would expect her to go, to harden herself, toughen herself, and once more, the vibration of where her personality should go as she created it in the same way she created footsteps and decisions made would not be about the cold. She was never going to be about the cold. The slow and deliberately forming shape of her future did seem to glow, vibrate, come into being as she seemed less to create it as excavate it. She needed to make truths, stop treating her personal life like a war. The words of Sun Tzu always counseling, all warfare is based upon deception. She had strategy in her bones, and she needed to forge something new. Not lose the strategy, but not always rely on her bones. Know when she was not at war. Cycle after cycle after cycle, Reapers had dealt with what was likely the reasonable and the expected. She couldn't be either of those things. When she made it back to Yesed's room, he was still occupied with visitors, which was so very encouraging. She defined him staying here as a value in the good thing column. They had already established part way that he would be staying here. She would not be uneasy or unwilling to discuss it with Yesed. She'd tell him the truth that she was allowed to tell while still keeping her promise to Senar that it would be her responsibility. He would miss his family while they were gone, but they would be back. And if they were not back, that's exactly why he needed to stay here. Yesed had very little power, and that frustrated him. She understood that, but considered him generationally and situationally worthy of protection. The reality is that on the ship he could certainly be adopted by Dr. Shakwas as a mascot and even learn quite a bit. But it would be a personal favor. It would be done gladly, and seeing Yased on the ship with his stereotypically withdrawn and cold father would be charming and might even boost everyone's morale. It might give Kara a buffer between her and Sennar. But it was not worth risking his life, and if he did not like that, it truly was best that it was her decision. He'd done more than enough life-risking, and at her inspiration, she would be inspired to protect him. She waved to Yased, who waved back. She smiled. She didn't interrupt his conversation with new friends. She pointed to Sennar and tilted her head, indicating she was going to steal him. Yased gave humorous, formal permission with a wave of his hand, Sennar's brow raising and Kara's head indicating he follow her into the hallway, which he did. She turned and walked at a casual stride until he caught up, the forward motion of the active pace stretching out legs that were just beginning to think they were not going to be able to sit down after being allowed to hold still temporarily, and then the subsiding complaint of her stamina as she moved again. She thanked her legs for being accommodating. When he reached her pace and stayed at her side, she said, eyes still on the patterns of the floor, feet finding their way along the tile symmetrically. You're not my bodyguard, and you're not my babysitter. You've been both. Thank you. All the thank you. I needed that. I need you. But even then I should have thanked you more, been more appreciative, complained less. I'm going to try to get out ahead of the curve here, learn some things. I'll take your word for it, that no apologies are needed from me to you, from you to me. We're past that. You're right. You're also right that you didn't ask for Spectre authorization, that you didn't ask for continued life, that you didn't ask for lungs. They're not debts. They're now done and are realities, and you should do what you want with them. I'm going to do what I want with what I have, also without need for apology. Thank you for the offer of being my bodyguard, but I prefer guarding each other. Spectre Sennar Tualan, thank you for babysitting me during my meetings with Sooth. I threw foodstuffs at you, and that was ingracious. I don't believe I ever apologized for that, either. She didn't look at his face, imagined him smiling. There was a long silence until he said, technically, you still have not. I apologize for throwing foodstuffs at you. Considering your new position and the shape and direction you wish to take with your life, would you please accompany me to strategic meetings with Sooth? I should have asked you to sit down with us, to contribute your thoughts and your opinions. Granted, you're not all that shy as thoughts and opinions go, once you're pushed to having to express them because I'm never going to ask. She redirected from that swoop of thought. I'm not good at asking. I'd like to get better. Will you please present yourself as you wish, as you asked, include yourself in my decision-making process, which I should have done before, and you've earned. I'll be on the Normandy studying. I'll be back to visit Yased, but not every day. I'll be consulting with Sooth, because she has been compiling what data she has been able to gather regarding Geth movements and missions, communications, and intentions. We need to get serious about finding who or what is doing the coordinating. We're moving up the food chain of minions from Saren to Harbinger to whatever or whoever's next. We do know Sovereign was giving orders once. Sovereign is gone. Someone's still giving orders and giving them to Geth. Someone or someone's, organic or synthetic, is directing events. Sooth and I have not changed anything. She's tracking data for analysis now, but the analysis starts soon. I want you there. I'm thinking picnic. What is a picnic? Human word. Get a blanket, put everything you need on the outing in a basket. Go out into nature, find a lovely spot, unpack the basket, eat the food contained therein. Traditionally, there is insect life disrupting the event of some sort, but there weren't any insects on Mindwar, so I can't corroborate, and the bugs on the Normandy are mainly electronic. I can clear away a spot in my cabin. That's as much into nature as I want to go, as Palavin is not all that hospitable. And what shall I bring in my basket? Whatever you want. Would you teach me how to prepare drill fruit? I'd really like to learn. As you wish. As you wish, Sennar. I believe we could work better as a team than we have before. She couldn't tell if it was a lack of courage or an overset amount of it that tore her eyes from the tile, turned her directly into his path, and threw her arms around him. No words. A new surge of adrenaline, shaking legs, and I probably shouldn't have done that. And criticism mostly of the impulsivity of it. But that faded because it seemed right. It did seem right. Continued to. He was too controlled to be startled, wasn't brought up short, only kept his arms out and extended to the side for too long. And then she just as impulsively said, "Hug me. I feel stupid standing here like this." Is that an order? Yes. Very well. His arms wrapped around her, and she felt a physical and an emotional outrush of held breath. She closed her eyes, wrapped in his reassuringly steady synesthesia glow. He kissed her hair and said, "This could appear to be an obvious manipulation tactic, Listen. I am wary of your motivations. Are you going to stomp off an offended suspicion?" Possibly. I believe you've established that I'm stuck with you permanently, yes? Stuck with sounds unpleasant. Permanently accompanied by? Somewhat better. Untrue? Yes. So, we could both be deeply suspicious of obvious manipulation tactics. Or we could focus our energies on the real enemy. Garrus? I was thinking more of Reapers. Ah, them. You have a predictably one-track mind, Listen. So I have been told. If you are my constant companion, and I am yours, I don't want to be at war. I won't be at war. I can't and won't let that happen. And what is the alternative? I'm going to trust you. I must advise you that trusting me is a historically foolish position to take. I aim to change the future. It was a historically foolish position to oppose Reapers also. And if I do not deserve trust? Maybe you won't deserve it until you know you really have it. You hope that the burden of your trust bears enough weight to make me trustworthy? Sounds kind of stupid when you say it that way. I believe that is what I am trying to point out. I'm going to try anyway. Trust, picnics, and drill fruit recipes. Your conditions for such a gift? I don't think of it as a gift. I think of it as something you've earned, something you deserve. Your conditions for such a gift? There was a briefly clouded moment where she thought she really should set conditions. But that was a test, wasn't it? A trusted person doesn't need conditions. She breathed through the laughter until it stopped, breathed along with the pace of his new lungs under his leathers for a moment. She said, "That's not how trust works." So, a declaration, my arms around you, and food in a basket. All is well? I'm not asking to be trusted. I have no idea how it's going to work, but despite you telling me it's a bad idea and historically a losing strategy, if my future or all my futures involve you, and I do not wish to be at war with you in any future, games theory requires this. New game, opening move. Prisoner's dilemma. As I have confessed, I do not wish to be at war with you, and I am thinking of the future. Yes, my move is to trust you, love you, be your family, be your potential companion. Conditionally. Yes. As you stated, Lassam, you have everything. You in a position of everything to lose, and me in a position of everything to gain. Your attention elsewhere and mine focused on you. You are aware of your vulnerabilities and wish to garner trust to buffer against accumulating losses. I must again advise that it makes me appear to be a fool, and I am not a fool. You could leave and gather everything to you. I would have to stipulate that you are, in fact, at least somewhat of a fool, as everything seems to be defined as me, and there's a lot more out there you could gather that isn't as one-track mindy. You're not staying to save the galaxy. That might happen, but that's technically a side goal of yours. You're staying to save me. For myself. Yes, there are lots of conditions there. I hear I'm going to have to beg. A treasured ambition. Huh. Well, there's a mental image. Several mental images, also treasured. And there went her massive flush to her face, the weakness in her legs more pronounced, his arms incrementally tighter. She knew if she stepped away he'd let her go, but she didn't want to. Instead, she said, I'm working on being offended. I am. So you should. Theoretically, though, I'm getting closer to and not farther away from that goal, if your wiles are on point. Do you require a demonstration of wiles? I do not. Very well. I require a picnic. Then I require a basket. She believed she understood. He understood. They were both masters of the game, and the rules were decided. Panifa, Sun Tzu, games theory, and the stated goals of a drill, entirely certain that his goals were worthy of being achieved, despite the odds. His goal involved Garrus being dead. Now, that may sound alarming, and of course it is, but where she was trusting him, where she would not allow that trust to be degraded, was that he would not do it himself. He would in fact protect Garrus, die for him, because he was family, because that would be cheating. And he was telling the truth that he would cheat, but not about that. The ironic part was that she was the one assuring that Garrus's life was going to be at high risk, just as hers was. Garrus would be most likely to die under her command. Sennar need only wait. She'd better own that. She'd better own that if Sennar died, it would be at her command. She'd better own that if Yased stayed behind, it was because she said so. From this moment on, she could not afford to be hijacked or countermanded, and she was at the highest risk of that happening. Because she needed her team. She needed every member. She did, in fact, need every living, sentient creature's goodwill, and might not even succeed with it. So although it scared her, she pulled back from the hug, her arms still around him. She finally looked at his face, having immersed herself in the glow of synesthesia, faith, and trust. He was appropriately amused, appropriately understanding, and even appropriately warning her that he understood her choice, but he was untrustworthy. None of that was new information. Hopefully it was new that she was in fact going to give him what he asked for, what he earned. Honesty, trust. She was owning it. That meant she owned Garrus. She owned Russ. She owned Senar. She owned Yosset. None of that was new information. There was a corollary to, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime, and much of that came down to expectation. If there was to be redemption, if there was to be success, inspiration was in fact what guided many paths. If Senar was treated as though he were doing the crime, even knowing he wished to, the fact that he held himself back from selfish gain and had repeatedly, despite the fact that his desire and possessiveness grew and did not wane, if he were accused of such, if he were excluded, he'd already be doing the time for a crime he had not in fact committed. So why not do the crime? With no honor, no redemption, no trust to be gained, why take further risk with no potential reward at all? Provide trust. Provide potential for cooperative reward. The potential was there, would be there. But she would not condemn him or allow him to be condemned, even from Garrus. He was honest about what he wanted. He wanted her. He followed her will. He said she was safe with him. At any moment this man could destroy everything she was aiming for, could have already done it at much more vulnerable points in their history. If he was going to do the crime, he would not provoke her into accusation. He would not provoke Garrus into fury. He would have to own that he destroyed her mission, destroyed her bond, and destroyed her purpose, and then he would have to try to live with that, with only her contempt as his compensation. Yes, he could. They all knew. He knew. He could use venom and make her forget. But he'd know. Understanding passed between them as it often did, whether through words or eye contact or the shape of actions, the shape of intent. She looked him in his eyes, giving him the woman he wanted, the woman in his arms, that full potential of trust and love and shared future. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't going to back down or give up on owning him. He did not own her yet. And she must keep that the truth. She must be whole. She must be exquisitely honest, the only way through his traps and temptations. Her palm moved to the side of his face, fingers aligning along curves of his frill. She smiled and said, I need you. I always will. I've been apologizing for that. I won't anymore. It's okay. If I ever earn the right to be with you, that I'd have to beg you. You've earned it. There was a tensing, a movement of the muscles around his eyes, surprise and vulnerability, his face tilted into her palm. Such small things on his face, tiny involuntary changes that made him look younger, made him look like hers, made her heart pound. He was hers. She had to remember that, not potentially, not theoretically, literally, and right now. It had to be truth to her because it was truth to him. It was unbearable vulnerability that she had to bear. She leaned up on tiptoe, kissed at his throat where before Venice had a scar, where she lived on and in his skin, where he had treasured memories and dralled them, and he was inspired. She whispered, I love you. Thank you, Senor. Her legs attempted to tremble, and she wouldn't allow it. She couldn't afford to tremble any more.